Jake Williams, a 12-year-old boy with a lanky frame and curious eyes, walked along the sidewalk of his new neighborhood, clutching a worn basketball bag in his hands. His family had moved to this Chicago suburb a week ago. White picket fences, manicured lawns, the smell of freshly brewed coffee drifting from someone's window. But to Jake, the place felt cold, alien. The neighbor's stares, peeking from behind curtains, cut sharper than the autumn wind whistling in his ears. It was April 14th, 2025. Jake had heard his parents say, "It's safer here, that we earned this place." But he knew the truth. Not everyone was happy about new neighbors, especially ones like them. His dad, who spent days tinkering with engines, and his mom, who came home from night shifts at the hospital, believed in better days. Jake, though, felt the tension every time he stepped outside. The sun was dipping below the horizon as he headed home from the basketball court near the school. His sneakers thudded softly on the asphalt, Cole blaring through his earbuds. Jake didn't notice the police car creeping up behind him. Its headlights flashed, and a siren gave a sharp blare, making him jump. He yanked out his earbuds and turned, his heart pounding in his throat. "Hey, you kid." The voice was harsh, like a slap. "Stop right where you are. What's about to happen in the next few minutes will shock you. But before we dive into the story, make sure to subscribe and give a like. Now let's jump in." The policeman lumbered out of the car, stocky, with a gray buzz cut and a flushed face. The name, O'Connor, glinted on his badge. His eyes, narrowed and cold, locked onto Jake like he was a criminal caught red-handed. "What are you doing skulking around here?" "Huh," he barked, stepping closer. His boots scraped the asphalt, his hand resting on his holster. "This ain't your ghetto, you little." Jake froze. The word hit like a punch, but he gripped the strap of his bag and forced himself to breathe. His mom always said, "Don't react. Don't give them a reason." But his chest burned. "I live here," he said quietly but clearly, "on Willow Street." O'Connor sneered, as if Jake had told a bad joke. "Live here? You." He spat on the sidewalk. "Don't lie to me, you little thief. I know your kind, loitering around, then stuff starts disappearing. What did you steal today? Huh?" Jake felt heat flood his cheeks. He wanted to shout that he hadn't stolen anything, that he was just a kid who'd been playing basketball. But he knew one wrong move and things would get worse. "I didn't do anything," he said, staring down at his sneakers. "I'm just going home." "Just going home?" O'Connor mocked, stepping so close Jake could smell the tobacco on his breath. "Listen, punk, I don't care what you're spinning. People like you don't belong here. You and your family better clear out before I make real trouble for you." A man peeked out from a nearby yard, older, with a gray beard and garden shears in hand. He stood by his fence, arms crossed, staring hard at Jake. "Trouble, officer," he called, "'cause this one looks like he's up to something." "Got that right, Mr. Wilson," O'Connor replied, not taking his eyes off Jake. Typical suspicious type. Probably cased half the street already. Jake clenched his fists, but kept them at his sides. His heart pounded, a lump rising in his throat. Across the street, a woman appeared, 60-ish, with a tightly tied headscarf. She stopped by her mailbox, her lips twisting into a sneer. "I saw him hanging around the school," she said loudly. "Who knows what creeps like him are doing there?" "Exactly, Marge," O'Connor nodded. "But I'll handle it. This kid's gonna regret showing up here." Jake felt the ground sway beneath him. 3 against 1. A cop spitting venom. Neighbors looking at him like he was dirt on their pristine lawns. He wanted to run, to hide, but he knew that would only prove them right. "I can show you where I live," he said, his voice trembling with strain. "My mom's home." O'Connor grabbed his shoulder, squeezing so hard Jake winced. "Don't tell me what to do, punk," he snarled. You think I'd believe a liar like you? All your kind does is lie and steal. Sit on the curb, now, before I cuff you." Panic clawed at Jake's throat, but he forced himself to stand tall. He wouldn't sit. He wouldn't give them that. "I didn't do anything," he repeated, meeting O'Connor's eyes. The cop raised his hand, as if to strike, but a screech of tires cut through the air. An old pickup stopped a few yards away, and a man stepped out, tall, with gray hair and a faded denim jacket. He held a grocery bag and frowned at the scene. "Bill O'Connor, what the hell are you doing?" His voice was low but sharp, like a snapping branch. O'Connor turned, his face flaring with irritation. "Stay out of it, Harris," he snapped. "I'm dealing with this." He jerked his head at Jake. "This problem." "Problem?" Harris echoed. "He's a kid, Bill. 12 years old, if I'm not mistaken. What's he done besides walk down the street?" "He doesn't belong here," O'Connor hissed. "And I won't let his kind ruin our neighborhood." Harris set his bag on the ground and stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he glanced from O'Connor to Jake. "What's your name, kid?" "Jake," he answered softly, still feeling the heat of O'Connor's grip on his shoulder. "Where do you live?" "Willow Street, number 14. Harris nodded, as if that settled it. "I know that house. New family, right?" He turned back to O'Connor. "Let him go, Bill. You've caused enough shame here." O'Connor's jaw clenched, but he slowly released Jake. His eyes burned with hatred. "This isn't over," he hissed, pointing at Jake. "I'll be watching you, punk. Don't think you're getting away with this." He climbed into his car and peeled out, leaving a cloud of dust. Marge slipped behind her fence, muttering under her breath, while Mr. Wilson turned away as if nothing had happened. Jake stood trembling with anger and humiliation, but refused to cry. Harris stepped closer. "You okay, kid?" he asked, his voice softening. Jake nodded, though his chest felt tight. "Thanks," he mumbled. Harris sighed, shaking his head. "Don't thank me. This shouldn't have happened. Go home, Jake, and don't let them make you feel less than you are." And he wouldn't give up. Jake pushed open the door to the house on Willow Street, the familiar creak of the hinges cutting through the silence. The hallway smelled of fried onion sauce. Mom was cooking dinner, probably her signature chicken wings. From the kitchen came the muffled sounds of the radio, playing an old Aretha Franklin tune, and Dad's voice, muttering something about a missing wrench. Usually these sounds soothed Jake, but today they felt distant, like he was watching his life through thick glass. He kicked off his sneakers by the door, not bothering to untie them, and dropped his basketball bag on the floor. His hands were still trembling, and O'Connor's words, "Comma, thief, not from here," buzzed in his head like a swarm of wasps. Jake took a deep breath, trying to push them away, but they clung, stung, wouldn't let go. "Jake, that you?" Mom called from the kitchen. Her voice, warm and a little weary after her shift, usually made him smile. Not this time. "Yeah," he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. He didn't want to worry them. Didn't want Mom frowning again, or Dad clenching his fists, hearing what had happened. Jake headed toward the kitchen, but paused in the doorway. Mom, Linda, stood at the stove, stirring sauce in a pot. Her nurse's scrubs hung over a chair, her hair pulled into a messy bun. Dad, Roy, sat at the table, tools spread out before him. He always tinkered after work, like it helped him think. His hands, calloused and stained with grease, moved calmly, but Jake knew. One wrong word, and those hands would ball into fists. "You're late," Mom said, not looking up from the pot. "I told you to be home before dark." "Sorry," Jake mumbled, sliding into a chair across from Dad. He stared at the wooden tabletop, scarred from years of family dinners. His fingers fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. Roy glanced up from his wrench. "Something wrong, son?" His voice was low, like the hum of an engine, and Jake felt Dad's gaze pierce through him. Roy always knew when something was off, ever since Jake used to come home bruised from fights in their old neighborhood. Jake sighed. He didn't want to tell them, wanted to bury this day deep, forget O'Connor, the neighbors, their stares. But silence was harder. A cop stopped me, he said quietly, still looking at the table. Linda spun around, the spoon in her hand freezing midair. The sauce hissed on the stove, but she didn't notice. "What did you say?" Her voice sharpened, eyes narrowing. "What cop? For what?" Roy set the wrench down slowly, but with enough force to make the wood creak. "Talk, Jake," he said, his tone not a request, but a demand. Jake swallowed, feeling the lump in his throat grow. He hated this. Hated seeing Mom's face pale, Dad's eyes darken with anger. But he started, softly, almost a whisper. "I was walking home from the court. Just walking, listening to music. Then this car. Police car. He got out, started yelling. Said I didn't belong here, that I was..." Jake faltered. The words stuck like a bone in his throat. "Called me a... Said I was a thief, that I had no place here. Grabbed my shoulder, shouted at me to sit on the curb." Linda shut off the stove with a snap and strode to the table, her hands shaking. "He touched you." Her voice was low, but it carried steel. "Jake, look at me. Did he hit you?" "No." Jake shook his head. "But..." "He wanted to. I could tell. Said he'd keep watching me. That we all need to get out." Roy's fists clenched, his knuckles whitening. "Name?" he growled. "What's his name?" "O'Connor," Jake replied, picturing the badge glinting in the streetlight. "Officer O'Connor." Linda covered her mouth, her eyes glistening with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. She sat beside Jake, resting a hand on his shoulder, warm, firm. "What else?" she asked. "What else happened?" Jake sighed, remembering the neighbors, Mr. Wilson with his shears, Marge with her venomous words. The neighbors. They watched. One said I looked suspicious. Another said I was hanging around the school, like I stole something. They all... He trailed off, searching for words. They were all against me. Except one guy, Harris. He stepped in, told O'Connor to let me go. Roy shot up, the chair scraping the floor. He stalked to the window, staring out at the dark street where streetlights glowed. "We moved here so you'd be safe," he said, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. "So you wouldn't hear that crap. And now some cop dares." He spun around. "I'm going to the sheriff. O'Connor's gonna answer for this." "Roy, wait." Linda raised a hand, her voice calm but taut. "We can't just barge in there. You know how it works. They'll cover for him. Say Jake did something. We need a plan." "A plan." Roy slammed his fist into his palm. "My son was humiliated, Linda. Called. That word. And you want me to sit here and plan." Jake dropped his head. He hated this. Hated that he was making them fight, that Mom looked like she might cry, that Dad seemed ready to tear down the police station. "I don't want you fighting over this," he said softly. I'll handle it." Linda turned to him, her eyes full of pain but also pride. "You don't have to handle this alone, Jake," she said, squeezing his hand. "You're our son, and we won't let anyone treat you like that. But we'll do it right, not their way, with shouting and fists. We'll show them who we are." Roy exhaled, returning to the table. He sat, his shoulders slumping as the anger ebbed. "What do you want to do, son?" he asked, looking at Jake for the first time that night without fury, only concern. Jake thought for a moment. He remembered Harris, his calm voice, his certainty. He remembered how O'Connor backed off when someone stood up. Maybe shouting and fists weren't the only way. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I don't want to run, and I don't want them thinking they broke me. Maybe I'll talk to someone. At school. Or Harris. He seems okay. Linda nodded, her lips curving into a faint smile. That's my boy, she said quietly. You're stronger than they know. Roy rubbed his face, then looked at Jake. All right, he said, but if O'Connor comes near you again, I'll have a word with him. And it won't be your way. Jake forced a smile, though his chest still ached. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Whether O'Connor would return, whether the neighbors would stop whispering behind his back. But for the first time that evening, he felt he wasn't alone. His family was here, and that gave him the strength to keep going. The next morning, Jake woke to the sound of his alarm, but his eyes had been open for a while. He lay staring at the ceiling, where shadows from the streetlights swayed like ghosts. O'Connor's words, the neighbor's stares, Mom's trembling voice, and Dad's anger swirled in his head. Today was the first day after the incident, and Jake knew he couldn't just hide. But he wouldn't shout, like Dad wanted. He had to find another way. He pulled on his favorite blue hoodie, slung his backpack over his shoulder, and stepped outside. The air was cool, smelling of wet leaves after last night's rain. Willow Street looked the same, neat lawns, parked cars. But now every fence felt like a wall hiding Marge's or Mr. Wilson's eyes. Jake gripped his backpack strap and headed to school, holding his head high, like Harris had said. At school, the usual chaos hummed. Kids shouting in the halls, lockers slamming, the smell of cheap pizza from the cafeteria. But for Jake, everything was different. He felt the stares, not from everyone, but enough to notice. A couple of older kids whispered something, snickering as he passed. Jake didn't catch it, but he could guess. In his old neighborhood, he was used to it, but here he'd hoped for better. He was wrong. During break, he sat in the courtyard, munching an apple, when a girl from his class approached, Emily, with a red ponytail and freckles. She clutched a notebook covered in Star Wars stickers and looked a bit awkward. Hey, Jake, she started, sitting on the bench beside him. I heard what happened yesterday. My mom was talking to Marge. It's not right. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Jake glanced at her, surprised. He'd expected anything, mockery, questions, indifference. But not this. Thanks, he said quietly, turning the apple in his hands. But I don't want pity. Emily nodded, her cheeks flushing. I'm not pitying you. I wouldn't know what to do in your place. Are you going to do something about it? Jake paused. He didn't have an answer, but her words stirred something inside. Maybe he wasn't alone. Maybe there was a chance. I don't know, he said honestly. But I don't want things to stay like this. Emily gave a small smile. If you need help, I'm in. My mom knows everyone around here. She could talk to people. Jake nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest. It was a small step, but it meant more than he could explain. That afternoon after school, Jake spotted Harris by the local store. The old man stood by his pickup, loading groceries into the bed. His denim jacket was dusted with dirt, his eyes as sharp as they'd been yesterday. Jake, he called, noticing him. How you holding up? Jake stopped, shrugging. Fine, he said, though it wasn't entirely true. Thanks for stepping in. Harris waved it off, like it was nothing. I've seen guys like O'Connor my whole life, he said, his voice quieter. My son, he was about your age when something like that happened to him. I couldn't protect him, but I can try with you. Jake felt his throat tighten. He didn't know what to say, but Harris didn't wait for a reply. If he bothers you again, tell me. I know folks at City Hall. O'Connor's not as untouchable as he thinks. Jake nodded, his thoughts buzzing. Harris wasn't just a neighbor. He understood, and that gave Jake an idea. That evening at dinner, he told his parents about Emily and Harris. Linda listened, her fork hovering, her eyes glinting with hope. Roy sat silent, but his face softened. You want to fight this, don't you? He asked when Jake finished. Not fight, Jake said, choosing his words. Show them I'm not what they think. That we're not. Maybe if I talk to people, not O'Connor, but others, they'll get it. Linda rested a hand on his shoulder. It's a hard road, son, she said, but I'm proud of you. Roy sighed but nodded. Just be careful, he said. And if anything happens, I'm still having words with that cop my way. The next week, with help from Emily and her mom, Jake organized a small meeting in the school auditorium. He didn't know what to expect, but more people showed up than he'd thought. Teachers, a few parents, even Mr. Wilson, who stood in the back with a grim look. Harris sat in the front row, arms crossed, eyes warm. Jake stood before them, knees shaking, but his voice was steady. My name's Jake Williams, he began. I moved here 2 weeks ago. I like basketball and comics. I want to be an engineer, but some people think I'm a thief because I'm... He hesitated, then pushed on, because I'm black. I don't want you to be scared of me. I just want to be part of this place, like you. The room was silent. Then Emily raised her hand. I know Jake, she said. He's all right, and if we don't give him a chance, we're no better than that cop. Harris stood, his voice booming in the quiet. I've lived here 30 years, he said. I've seen this town change. If we turn away from kids like Jake, we lose more than they do. Think about it. Some nodded, others looked away. Mr. Wilson left without a word, but Marge stayed, lips tight, listening. Jake didn't know if it would change anything, but he felt the weight on his shoulders lighten. O'Connor didn't show up that day, but a few days later, Jake heard from Harris that he'd been reassigned to another district after a complaint to the sheriff. It wasn't a victory. Jake knew people like O'Connor didn't change overnight, but it was a start. Neighbors stopped averting their eyes when he passed. Emily started sitting with him at lunch, and one day, even Mr. Wilson gave him a nod as Jake walked from the court. And one day he believed it would grow. The next morning, Jake woke to the sound of his alarm, but his eyes had been open for a while. He lay staring at the ceiling, where shadows from the streetlights swayed like ghosts. O'Connor's words, the neighbor's stares, Mom's trembling voice, and Dad's anger swirled in his head. Today was the first day after the incident, and Jake knew he couldn't just hide. But he wouldn't shout, like Dad wanted. He had to find another way. He pulled on his favorite blue hoodie, slung his backpack over his shoulder, and stepped outside. The air was cool, smelling of wet leaves after last night's rain. Willow Street looked the same, neat lawns, parked cars. But now every fence felt like a wall hiding Marge's or Mr. Wilson's eyes. Jake gripped his backpack strap and headed to school, holding his head high. Like Harris had said, at school, the usual chaos hummed. Kids shouting in the halls, lockers slamming, the smell of cheap pizza from the cafeteria. But for Jake, everything was different. He felt the stares, not from everyone, but enough to notice. A couple of older kids whispered something, snickering as he passed. Jake didn't catch it, but he could guess. In his old neighborhood, he was used to it, but here he'd hoped for better. He was wrong. During break, he sat in the courtyard, munching an apple, when a girl from his class approached Emily with a red ponytail and freckles. She clutched a notebook covered in Star Wars stickers and looked a bit awkward. Hey, Jake, she started, sitting on the bench beside him. I heard what happened yesterday. My mom was talking to Marge. It's not right. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Jake glanced at her, surprised. He'd expected anything, mockery, questions, indifference. But not this. Thanks, he said quietly, turning the apple in his hands. But I don't want pity. Emily nodded, her cheeks flushing. I'm not pitying you. I wouldn't know what to do in your place. Are you going to do something about it? Jake paused. He didn't have an answer, but her words stirred something inside. Maybe he wasn't alone. Maybe there was a chance. I don't know, he said honestly. But I don't want things to stay like this. Emily gave a small smile. If you need help, I'm in. My mom knows everyone around here. She could talk to people. Jake nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest. It was a small step, but it meant more than he could explain. That afternoon after school, Jake spotted Harris by the local store. The old man stood by his pickup, loading groceries into the bed. His denim jacket was dusted with dirt, his eyes as sharp as they'd been yesterday. "Jake," he called, noticing him. "How you holding up?" Jake stopped, shrugging. "Fine," he said, though it wasn't entirely true. "Thanks for stepping in." Harris waved it off, like it was nothing. "I've seen guys like O'Connor my whole life," he said, his voice quieter. "My son. He was about your age when something like that happened to him. I couldn't protect him, but I can try with you." Jake felt his throat tighten. He didn't know what to say, but Harris didn't wait for a reply. "If he bothers you again, tell me. I know folks at City Hall. O'Connor's not as untouchable as he thinks." Jake nodded, his thoughts buzzing. Harris wasn't just a neighbor, he understood, and that gave Jake an idea. That evening at dinner, he told his parents about Emily and Harris. Linda listened, her fork hovering, her eyes glinting with hope. Roy sat silent, but his face softened. "You want to fight this, don't you?" he asked when Jake finished. "Not fight," Jake said, choosing his words. "Show them I'm not what they think. That we're not. Maybe if I talk to people, not O'Connor, but others, they'll get it." Linda rested a hand on his shoulder. "It's a hard road, son," she said, "but I'm proud of you." Roy sighed but nodded. "Just be careful," he said. "And if anything happens, I'm still having words with that cop my way." The idea that took root in Jake's mind wasn't grand, but it felt right. He didn't want to confront O'Connor head-on. That would only make things worse, like throwing gas on a fire. Instead, he wanted to talk to the people who weren't shouting, the ones who might listen. Emily's offer and Harris's story gave him a starting point, but he knew it wouldn't be easy. People didn't change just because a kid asked them to. The next week, Jake and Emily worked with their social studies teacher, Ms. Carter, to organize a small event at school, a community talk, she called it. Ms. Carter, a soft-spoken woman with gray streaks in her hair, had grown up in a segregated neighborhood and knew what Jake was up against. "You're brave for trying," she told him, "but don't expect miracles. Change is slow." Jake didn't expect miracles. He just wanted a chance to be heard. The event was set for a Thursday evening in the school auditorium. Emily's mom helped spread the word, and Jake made a few flyers, simple ones, with "Let's talk, building a better neighborhood" written in bold. He was nervous, his stomach twisting every time he thought about standing in front of people. What if no one came? What if they laughed or, worse, ignored him? But when the evening arrived, the auditorium wasn't empty. About 30 people showed up, some teachers, a few parents, kids from his class, and, to Jake's surprise, Harris, who sat in the front row with his arms crossed and a nod of encouragement. Even Mr. Wilson was there, leaning against the back wall, his face unreadable. Marge didn't come, but Jake hadn't expected her to. Jake stood at the podium, his hands sweaty, gripping the edges. He'd practiced what to say with Mom, but now, with all those eyes on him, the words felt heavy. "My name's Jake Williams," he started, his voice cracking before steadying. "I'm 12. I moved here a couple of weeks ago with my family. I like basketball, comics, and I want to be an engineer someday. But since we got here, some people have treated me like I don't belong, like I'm trouble just because of how I look." He paused, glancing at Harris, who gave a small nod. Jake took a breath and kept going. "Last week, a cop stopped me while I was walking home. He called me names, bad ones, said I was a thief, that my family should leave. Some neighbors backed him up. I was scared, but I was angry too, not just for me, but for my parents, who worked hard to get us here. I don't want to fight or yell. I just want to live here, like anyone else." and I think if we talk, really talk, maybe we can understand each other better." The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt like it could break any second. Then Emily stood up from the third row. "I know Jake," she said, her voice clear despite her nervous fidgeting. "He's in my class, and he's cool. He helped me with math homework once. If we judge him before we know him, we're the ones missing out." A few people nodded. Ms. Carter stepped forward, her eyes scanning the crowd. "Jake's right about talking," she said. "This neighborhood's changing, like the whole country's been changing for years. We can't keep holding on to old fears. I've seen what happens when we do. Good people get hurt. Let's hear him out." Harris cleared his throat and stood, his presence filling the room. "I've lived here 30 years, he said. "Lost my son to a world that didn't give him a chance. I'm tired of seeing kids like Jake pay for other people's mistakes. He's not asking for favors, just a fair shot. If we can't give him that, what kind of town are we?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some faces softened, others stayed blank. Mr. Wilson shifted uncomfortably but didn't leave. A woman in the back, who Jake recognized as Emily's mom, raised her hand. "I'll admit," she said, "when I heard about the incident, I wasn't sure what to think. But hearing Jake tonight, I think we owe him a chance to prove himself. And maybe we need to look at ourselves too." The discussion went on for an hour. Some people shared stories about feeling unwelcome, about judging too quickly. Others stayed silent, but they listened. Jake didn't feel like he'd won anything, but he felt seen, and that was enough for now. A few days later, Harris stopped by the house with news. Someone had filed a formal complaint against O'Connor, and he'd been reassigned to desk duty pending a review. "Not my doing," Harris said with a wry smile, "but I might have made a call or two." Jake didn't know if O'Connor would face real consequences. Cops like him often didn't, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, things shifted slowly. Emily became a regular at Jake's lunch table, sometimes bringing another kid, Tyler, who was obsessed with Spider-Man comics like Jake. One afternoon, Mr. Wilson caught Jake's eye while trimming his hedges and gave a curt nod, not a smile, but not a scowl either. Marge still crossed the street when she saw him, but Jake didn't let it sting as much. At home, Mom and Dad watched him closely, pride mixing with worry. Roy didn't go to the sheriff, though Jake caught him glaring at every police car that passed. Linda started attending neighborhood watch meetings, speaking up about fairness, her nurses calm, making people listen. "You lit a spark," she told Jake one night. "Don't let it go out." Jake didn't expect the world to change. He knew some neighbors would always whisper that O'Connor wasn't the last person to call him names. But sitting on the porch one evening, basketball spinning in his hands, he looked out at Willow Street, its fences, its shadows, its small signs of life. He'd spoken up, and a few people had heard him. Emily waved from her bike across the street, and Harris's pickup rumbled by with a quick honk. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close. But Jake felt something growing inside him. Not anger, not fear, but a quiet strength. He'd planted a seed, and maybe, just maybe, it would take root. One day, he'd walk these streets and feel like he belonged. Until then, he'd keep going one step at a time.